Yeah. Please tell me that I can't, that I won't, that I fail, that I'll never make it out, yeah. Please tell me all the bad and the good, fill my head full of every single doubt. Yeah.
We're doing the NFC North. We're almost all the way through. We've come to the team that everybody's kind of excited to watch, and that's the Detroit Lions. Because everyone is so excited, I want to keep that excitement going. I have Adam Hulse, NFL sports writer for SportsKita.com. He's been here for every episode. We figured we'd stick him around as we go through the Detroit Lions. People are up on these guys this year. I guess there's a lot of reason. Started 1-6, and then they rifled off 8 of their last 10. They're clearly getting it together. They dished off their leading rusher to New Orleans, but people still having a lot of faith in this team. The schedule probably has a little something to do with it, if you ask me.
People are crazy high on the Lions this year. This, in my opinion, is the most hype team coming into this season, especially when you factor in that, sure, the Lions finished strong last year. They didn't make the playoffs last year. It's been a long time since they've made the playoffs. They really haven't done much of anything in recent years. Sure, they made a couple of off-season moves, but like nothing that like crazy like moves the needle. A lot of hype, though, around the Lions. Let's see if they can live up to it.
I think the biggest thing is the fact that they lost their leading rusher, and yet we're still giving them a lot of credit, me included. I mean, I had two. Williams, 1,000-yard rusher, 17 touchdowns off the board, and yet still a lot of faith here. Winning 8 of the last 10 is also a big thing. They finished 5th in points for, but they also finished 28th in points against. The running theme throughout the NFC North is the lack of defense, especially the rush defense. Goff, good enough for QB10 on your fantasy rosters, QB6 for yards at 44-38, and tied with Kirk Cousins with 29 touchdowns, QB5. The difference between Goff and Cousins had 14 interceptions. Goff only put up 7. The other nice difference is the Detroit Lions, Goff took the least amount of sacks in the entire NFC North. He only had 23. Next up was Rodgers with 32, and then it keeps getting worse from there. Detroit split with Minnesota, but they swept Green Bay. They swept Chicago last year. Their now lead back Swift put 542 on the ground, through 389 through the air, 5 touchdowns, 3 receiving touchdowns to go along with those numbers. They've got Jackson. Amon St. Brown, good night. That guy went for over 1,100 yards, good enough for wide receiver 10. He's going to have to maintain that, but 106 receptions on 146 targets. That's 106 receptions, good enough for wide receiver 5 throughout the league. Leaf Raymond next. How dependent are they on St. Brown? Raymond had 616 yards and 0 touchdowns to St. Brown's 10. I mean, it's the ASB show out there in Detroit. Defense, last in yards, last in first downs given, 30th in pass yards given, 29th in rush yards given. That does not sound like a team that should win the division or even have a shot at the Super Bowl /playoff.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think that the Lions are going to kind of run away with this division. They're the favorite to win this division. But, there are a good amount of question marks here. I mean, you referenced the defense for one. Amon-Ra, the Sun God, he's incredible, right? One of the best route runners in the NFL. But, then who's the number 2 after that? They don't really have, a really deep receiving core. And the big thing for me with the offense is one of the real strengths of the Lions last year and why they were so successful, it was running the ball. That offense worked through the rushing game, and Goff's very good on the play-action pass. Not only did they lose their top runner, they lost both of their running backs during the offseason. They lost Swift and Jamal Williams, and most people are just assuming that, the rookie Gibbs and adding Montgomery, that it's just going to be the same thing, if not better than it was last year. But you never really know what you're getting with rookies, and just the fact that it's such a big change, there's no guarantee that they're going to be able to do what they did last year. And I know Jamal Williams is your guy. He's the touchdown machine, Jamal Williams. You love Jamal Williams. And, they just kind of kicked him to the side like he was nothing.
Montgomery is not a replacement for a Jamal Williams. Good receiving back, which is clearly the reason they brought him in. We talked about Montgomery was RB16 as far as receptions went, reception yards, finished as RB27 otherwise. The rookie's got some work to do. I've already given Detroit way too many wins. I know this already without looking at it. We do this live. We just go down the schedule, but a lot of these games have already been talked about on their schedule. So as we go through this, we've kind of already already decided many of these games if they're going to win or lose. I'm pretty sure I gave them a very optimistic finish to this schedule, but we're going to find out. Their first game is at Kansas City. That's not where you want your first game to be for anybody. I don't care how good you think you're going to be. Detroit definitely taking the loss as far as I'm concerned in week 1 at Kansas City.
In Kansas City, kickoff game of the entire season, ring ceremony for the Chiefs. I'm definitely not taking the Lions to upset them on that day.
Not really great for the second one. At least Seattle's coming to Detroit for game 2. You gave Detroit the loss. For some reason, I'm a little kind of high on Seattle. We're going to see if you get the Geno regression or not. It's in Detroit. I probably should have given Detroit the win, and I did. Detroit to beat Seattle. You gave Detroit the loss, thinking that Seattle's going to be a little bit better, even though it's in Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, the game being in Detroit, I guess this is a mini upset for the Seahawks. But, you know, I've said the same thing about the Seahawks all along, that I think Geno is going to regress this year, and it could be a pretty significant regression. But I love the rest of their roster so much that even with Geno's regression, I think that the Seahawks can still be a very good team this year.
I do too. It's the home thing for me. That's pretty much the only push here. Week 3, Atlanta comes to Detroit, dome to dome. It's just, I said it in a previous episode, Atlanta's going to suck, and Detroit, even if they are worse than they were last year, I still think they're better than Atlanta. We both did, and we gave Detroit the win in week 3.
You know, maybe Atlanta would have a shot if they were playing at home, because they are traditionally a very good home team, but in Detroit, I don't give them much of a chance.
Detroit swept Green Bay last year. They go to Green Bay in week 4. I gave Detroit the win. You account for the regression, the loss of Williams. Gave Detroit the loss in Green Bay.
Yeah, and it's that home division game type of thing. I really like home splits in divisional games, and Green Bay's in Lambeau. I'm taking the Packers.
Carolina comes to Detroit in week 5. We both gave Detroit the win. Probably a lot of home field advantage factoring into this one, and just the fact that Carolina's dealing with a whole new system, new quarterback, new coach, loss of their main running back. Detroit should be able to pull that one down.
Detroit should be able to pull that one down, and a rare loss for the Panthers on your schedule.
That'd be easy, but yes, Carolina, go back, listen to the episode, shock the world. It's the NFC South. What do you want? Week 6 at Tampa. Detroit travels to Tampa. I just don't like Tampa, and so I gave Detroit the win. You actually have Tampa pulling that one out. Is this a defensive thing?
It definitely could be a defensive type of thing. I think that Tampa has the ability this year to win some ugly games, because I do still really like their defense, especially with Todd Bowles being their head coach. I think they're going to be a tough defensive team. I think they're going to try to run the ball a lot. They obviously still have 2 very good wide receivers. So if Baker Mayfield can have a little bit of success anywhere, this is kind of the ideal situation for that. I'm not super high on the Bucs, but I think that this is one of those games where they can win ugly, and at home I think they do.
They pop over to Baltimore for week 7, and I say they pop over for a loss. Baltimore not great really anywhere except at that quarterback position, and Lamar is good enough, I think, to single-handedly take Detroit out. It's in Baltimore. I'm not going to say it's the toughest place to play, but it's not a fun place to play. Both of us giving Baltimore the win. Week 7.
Yeah, I mean, home field, I think, matters here. You mentioned Lamar. I think that at home against the Lions, that could be one of those big Lamar Jackson days.
I honestly think I might have gone Detroit here if it was in Detroit. Do you think that?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely possible. Home field definitely makes a difference. I'm not sure how I would have picked it the other way. Again, I just think Lamar can definitely have success against that Lions defense, and I think it's going to be a big day for him.
Week 8, Las Vegas comes to Detroit. Now, I can hands down say if this game was in Las Vegas, I would 100% give Las Vegas the win. Because it's in Detroit, it makes me think about it a little more. Las Vegas really giving us stuff to think about as we go through all these games.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that. In Las Vegas, I'd be taking the Raiders. In Detroit, I'll take the Lions. I think that these are 2 similarly skilled teams and kind of in like the same tier in terms of expectations. So in Detroit, I'll go with the Lions.
I'm actually going to give the Lions a loss at home against Las Vegas. I haven't given Las Vegas enough credit. They got the leading rusher. They got one of the best receivers in the NFL. Garoppolo's no slouch himself. As long as he can stay healthy, he's going to pull out some wins. I'm going to let Las Vegas come into Detroit and win this one it is before the bye. Week 9, the bye for Detroit, which means week 10, another AFC West team comes in, and that's the Chargers come into Detroit. It's after the bye. NFC North, we really haven't let that affect us. Usually game after the bye, we kind of give to the team coming off the bye, but we haven't really done that in the NFC North. Are you getting back on track here?
I am getting back on track here. I do generally like teams coming off the bye, like you referred to. I also like home teams a lot. I like especially home teams when you're playing a cross-conference opponent that, doesn't have to travel to your place too often. So a lot of things pointing Lions to this one. And another one of those situations where if this game was in LA, I might take the Chargers. I think this does have the makings of being an exciting, high-scoring game between the Chargers and Lions, but I'll take the Lions coming out on top.
Yeah, it's only because it's after the bye. That's literally the only reason I'm giving Detroit the win. I really want to pick the Chargers in this one. If this had been anywhere else on the schedule, I don't care where it was played, I would give Chargers the win. But because it's at home, and to be honest, I just gave Detroit the loss against another AFC West team in Las Vegas. Detroit's going to have to come out of a bye and win something to stay on track. Week 11, Chicago comes to Detroit. It's in Detroit. It's Chicago. If Detroit is going to have any chance of meeting the expectations that everybody seems to be laying out for them, they've got to be able to beat Chicago at home.
I agree with you. This is the kind of game at home that they have to win if they are going to meet their expectations, if they're going to make the playoffs like they fully expect to do. Not sure if they will or not, but they are going to beat the Bears at home.
Week 12, same situation, divisional game. Green Bay comes to Detroit. Detroit needs to be able to win this game. I say they lose it. You went ahead and gave them credit and said that they could get the job done.
Yeah, I mean, they have a nice little stretch here of home games. They're going to be in Detroit for, again, a solid stretch of 4 or 5 weeks here. They get some divisional games in that mix as well. I see this as a very important part of the Lions' schedule if they want to accomplish their goals this year. Home games, the bye week, divisional games, it's all right here, right in the middle, and I think that they're going to win this one.
Look, the end of their schedule, they go 5 of the last 8 against division opponents. So this is where they're going to have to make their money. I talked about their finish last year, winning 8 of the last 10. And people are going to come back and say, well, it depends on who you played. Well, look, the wins were against Green Bay. They were against Chicago. They were against the Giants. They lost to the Bills. They beat the Jags. They beat Minnesota. They beat the Jets. Okay. They lost to Carolina. They beat Chicago. They beat Green Bay. They had a lot of division opponents in those 10 games where they won 8 of them, and they handled business when business needed to be handled. Now, again, they had Jamal Williams, and that's a big difference. As we get to the end of this schedule, knowing how they finished out last year, they at least have the potential to finish out. Week 13, they go to New Orleans, dome team in a dome, but it's in New Orleans, and so we give Detroit the loss before they finish out this stretch.
Yeah, I mean, New Orleans always tough on road teams, obviously. Another one of those situations where if the game was in Detroit, maybe I'd see it a little bit differently. In New Orleans, and it being their first road trip after a long homestand, tough ask. I'm taking the same.
In true fashion, week 14, division opponent at Chicago, Adam Hulse with the home split. Detroit takes a loss at Chicago. I actually gave them the win and the sweep against Chicago. They swept them last year. I went ahead and went with it this year.
Yeah, I mean, home splits for me, but this could be a sneaky, important game on the schedule for this division race.
It absolutely could. Go back and listen to the other episodes in the NFC North, and you're going to see why. I'm going to bring that up again. In week 15, their last AFC West game, they play Denver. They get lucky, and Denver has to come to them. And for me, that could make the difference.
Definitely could make the difference for sure. We talk a lot about Mile High Stadium and how tough it is to play there, especially for teams that don't go there regularly, like an NFC team like the Lions. Advantage for them getting to stay at home for this one, so I'm taking the Lions.
You have Detroit beating everybody in the AFC West except Kansas City. They get lucky. They get all those games except the Kansas City game at home. Kind of going with your reasoning, how they can pull that off. I'm going to go ahead, man, that Denver game is hard for me because I do think Denver is going to be better, as do you. If it's in Mile High, maybe I think I probably definitely give Denver the win. season. It's the end of the season. That end of the season last year just really impressed me. I'll give Detroit the win. I'm going to give Detroit the win. They're at home. Detroit gets the win. Week 15. Week 16, it's at Minnesota. I gave Detroit the win again. You went with the home team and said Minnesota wins this one.
Yeah, I mean, I have Detroit winning all three of their home division games and losing all three of their road division games.
Week 17, they go to Dallas. Of course, Adam isn't going to let Dallas lose to Detroit of all teams in week 17. I actually said Detroit's going to beat them. Dallas is probably going to win this game, but I've already given Detroit the win, so I'll stick with it. I would probably take this one back, to be fair. And in the last game of the season, they see Minnesota again, 2 out of the last 3 weeks. We both give Detroit the win at home against Minnesota. We're about to tally this up. I have maybe 1 or 2 wins I would switch, plus minus 2 for me as we tally this up. You have really a pretty respectable record for this division for Detroit.
I mean, I think this is a pretty competitive division across the board. I don't see any of these 4 teams as significantly better than the field. I don't think anyone's going to run away with it. I think it's going to be a little bit of an ugly, tight division race, and I don't think it's going to require, 12, 13, 14 wins to win this division.
I have them at 12-5, which I admit I think is probably high. A lot of the teams that I've given these high records to, I stand behind. I think the schedule had a lot to do with it. They just got that much better. This one, I don't stand behind as much. 10-7, more realistic. You've given 8-9.
I mean, if you go and listen to the other teams in this division, this is going to be a tight division race. 8 might not be enough to get it done, but it's surely enough to keep them in the mix. 8-9, that should pretty much tell you that I do not have Detroit winning this division. A lot of people think that the Lions are going to run away with it. I obviously don't really see it that way. I think that they are getting overhyped, and I think some of the changes and things that happen this offseason may slow them down a little bit. And again, just reminding everybody one more time, the Lions did not even make the playoffs last year, so let's pump the brakes on calling them a Super Bowl contender.
Super Bowl contender is probably a bit much, and right now, you don't even have them winning the division. How's it really going to play out? We're going to find out. As we got one division left, Adam, we got AFC West. We saved them for last for a reason, and then we're going to really get the whole picture of the NFL, the records, who's going to the playoffs, who's not, where the wild card teams are going to be. Is the NFC North going to get one? I don't know. We're going to find out in the next episodes. Join us for the AFC West wherever you catch podcasts. Just put in keyword EFIN and you'll be able to find every single one. If you get lost, just go to @thateffin_show EFIN or @thateffin_sport_show over on YouTube. You can see how Adam's got the whole NFL season laid out and everything else cool that comes up over at sportskeeda.com. NFL writer Adam Hulse. Find his stuff at Adam Hulse Sports over on Twitter. Guys, we got 4 games left. We got 1 division left, and this whole picture is going to clear up real fast. Adam Hulse making it all possible for you guys to know where everyone's going to finish. We'll see you guys on the next show when we open up the AFC West with the Las Vegas Raiders. Everybody be safe out there. We'll see you next time.